Brookhaven National Laboratory is a DOE laboratory located on the eastern end of Long Island and operated by an organization called Brookhaven Science Associates under a prime contract with DOE. And under that prime contract, BSA is authorized to participate in partnering activities with other organizations under specific types of agreements. And I would like to review with you the types of agreements that we have available here at Brookhaven for partnering with other organizations and give you the highlights of some of these different types of agreements. The types of agreements that we are authorized to use in partnering with outside organizations are the Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, the Funds-In Agreement, which is called the Strategic Partnerships Projects Agreement, a Technical Service Agreement, an interagency agreement, and agreements for commercializing technology. In the following slides, I'd like to review the characteristics of each one of those agreements with you. The first type of agreement that I'd like to review is a Cooperative Research and Development Agreement. The acronym that's commonly used is CRADA. And the purpose of a CRADA is to allow two organizations, in this case Brookhaven and another organization, to collaborate and share the results of a jointly conducted research and development project. The funding for a CRADA can be either privately funded or federally funded. The benefits of the CRADA is that it allows two organizations to leverage research efforts and funding by B&L and our partner. It allows for the research results to be protected for up to 5 years and allows the partner to disclose proprietary information that we will be obligated to protect also for 5 years. Inventions made under the CRADA are owned by the organizations whose researchers are responsible for making the invention. If B&L researchers make an invention under the CRADA, our CRADA partner can negotiate an exclusive license within a field of use for the B&L-owned invention. There are a few requirements under a CRADA agreement that I would like to make you aware of. The first of which is the CRADA partner has to sign up to substantially manufacture any goods or products that embody CRADA-generated intellectual property in the United States. Secondly, there's a 90-day advance payment for privately funded work at B&L. There is a government use license to project-generated intellectual property, and signature approval by DOE is required. It's been our experience that CRADAs are an appropriate contracting mechanism for active collaborations. One area is that CRADAs allow companies that are interested in licensing BSA intellectual property to work with the B&L researcher to mature that technology so that it is better able to be commercialized. The next agreement that I'd like to review is the Strategic Partnership Projects Agreement, formerly called Work for Others Agreement. The purpose of an SPP agreement is that it allows B&L to perform mission-related work on a reimbursable basis for a sponsor. The funding for an SPP agreement can be either private or federal. There are several benefits to entering into an SPP agreement with Brookhaven. First, our sponsor would gain access to specialized or unique DOE facilities, services, or technical expertise. And that specialized expertise is not available in the private sector. Secondly, generated information under an SPP agreement can be held confidential and treated as the partner or the sponsor's proprietary information. For inventions under an SPP agreement, when private funds are used for the project, ownership of intellectual property is subject to project parameters. In many cases, the sponsor can own rights to B&L-generated intellectual property. When federal funds are used for the project, terms of the government funding agreement apply, which means Brookhaven would have rights to intellectual property made by its researchers under an SPP agreement. There are some requirements of an SPP agreement that I would like to make you aware of. First is that both Brookhaven and the sponsor agree that there will be no exclusive third-party license to project-generated intellectual property unless it's manufactured substantially in the United States. Second requirement is that there's a required 90-day advance payment before Brookhaven can commence work. There's a government use license retained by the U.S. government to project-generated intellectual property, and approval by the Department of Energy is required for all SPP projects. The next agreement that I'd like to speak about is a technical service agreement. A technical service agreement, or a TSA, is actually a form of an SPP agreement. It allows B&L to perform mission-related reimbursable work just as an SPP agreement does. The funding for a technical service agreement has to be private funding. There can't be federal funds involved. Some of the benefits of a TSA is that the sponsor would get access to the specialized or unique DOE facilities, services, or technical expertise. Generated information under a TSA can be treated as proprietary when marked as such by the partner. A TSA is an ideal agreement for consulting, testing, and evaluation. Some of the requirements of a TSA are that the terms are non-negotiable. DOE has pre-approved terms for a TSA, and they can't be changed. TSAs can only be used for projects that are less than $250,000 in estimated costs and less than 3 years in performance. A TSA cannot be used for R&D where project-generated intellectual property is expected. TSAs are pre-approved by DOE under most circumstances, and as is the case with CRADAs and SPPs, there's a 90-day advance payment required. The next agreement that I'd like to speak with you about is called an interagency agreement. An interagency agreement allows Brookhaven to perform work for non-DOE federal agencies. The funding for interagency agreements comes from the federal agencies and it's federal funding. The benefits of an interagency agreement: it allows access to specialized or unique DOE facilities, services, or technical expertise. It is strategic in that it allows B&L to partner with other agencies to assist in implementing large federal projects. And inventions and generated information under interagency agreements are dealt with in the same way as those under our prime contract. Some of the requirements of an interagency agreement is that interagency agreement can only be used when working with another federal agency. The DOE is also involved in the interagency agreement process, and the DOE field office here at Brookhaven negotiates agreement terms. And we need to get DOE approval for interagency agreements. The last agreement that I'd like to speak with you about is called Agreement for Commercializing Technology, ACT for short. Once again, ACT allows Brookhaven to perform mission-related reimbursable work for private sponsors. The funding for an ACT agreement has to be private. No federal funds can be used to support work under an ACT agreement. Benefits of an ACT agreement include access to specialized or unique DOE facilities, services, or technical expertise. There is flexibility in ACT agreements, which we don't have in the other agreements that I've spoken to you about. Agreement terms can be negotiated, provided that the DOE required intellectual property provisions and disclaimer are used. ACT agreements are more flexible than some of the other agreements that I've spoken to you about, in that agreement terms are negotiable. DOE is not involved in approving the agreement, but DOE does control the intellectual property provisions and disclaimer provisions of an ACT agreement. Some of the requirements of ACT include: the pricing structure may differ from other agreement types. There's a U.S. preference again in that the parties agree there will be no exclusive third-party licenses to project-generated intellectual property unless manufactured substantially in the United States. And DOE does have to approve the scope of work under an ACT agreement, but they don't have to approve the terms and conditions under an ACT agreement, and therefore BSA can be more flexible because the terms and conditions are not dictated to the degree that they are by DOE in the other agreements that I've spoken to you about. BSA, in entering into an ACT agreement, is accepting a certain amount of risk on its own, and in doing so can charge a fee to the sponsor as compensation for accepting that risk. If you have any questions or require additional information on the agreements that I've spoken to you about, I would suggest that you go to our website and familiarize yourself with the research programs that we currently have at the laboratory so that you can see if there's a match for your technical needs here at Brookhaven. Please keep in mind that while all the DOE national laboratories have similar commercialization departments and procedures, this is how we encourage and work with our strategic partners at B&L. If you were to contact other DOE national laboratories, you would find very similar procedures and agreements, but there may be some minor differences.